Heritage Institute. My name is Chuck Smythe, and I'm the senior ethnologist here. Today we're going to hear Dr. Steve Langdon discuss the Indigenous Southeast Alaskan wolf knowledge and observational and interactive knowledge provided by Indigenous experts and its significance. Dr. Langdon is Professor Emeritus of Anthropology at the University of Alaska, Anchorage, where he taught from 1976 to 2014. Dr. Langdon has specialized in research on the culture and history of the Tlingit and Haida peoples of Southeast Alaska from pre-contact conditions through the present period. Among his many projects include extensive research on traditional ecological knowledge and uses of salmon by the Tlingit and Haida, demonstrating their complex and rich relations between the people and the salmon that sustain their cultures for centuries. Over his 50-year career, Dr. Langdon also conducted research projects on many public policy issues impacting Alaska Natives. He has advocated for policies that sustain and promote rural Alaskan Native communities and their cultures in such areas as subsistence, limited entry, and other fisheries topics, lands, tribal government, the blood quantum issue, and co-management. I encourage people here to turn off their phones and remind everyone that we will be taking questions at the end, including those online who can ask a question through the chat function. Steve. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck, for that introduction. I'm pleased and happy to be back here, and I'd like to thank Dr. Rosita Worrell for the invitation to present this information today. It's a very special opportunity to engage in this research project and work with SHI on it going forward. Somebody told me today they heard some noises around, so maybe they'll hear some noises again here momentarily. We'll see. That's the loving cry that the Tlingit Gooch people like to sing too as well, on various occasions. So my topic today is some of the findings from our research that we conducted back between 2021 and 2023 on the indigenous knowledge of southeastern Alaska wolves, and talking as well about why this came to be there and its significance. On the 12th, my colleague and co-researcher, Dr. Jeff Brooks, will be talking specifically about how this research was structured in terms of the regulatory agency and the action that then was taking. So I urge you to learn from him about that. But at the outset here, I would like to make a correction in my previous talk in 2022. I spoke about the position of Gooch and the wolf, or wolf in Tlingit culture, specifically in regards to its use as a crest and the way in which Tlingit people conceive of themselves as wolves. And I made a mistake in which I apologize for, and want to make the correction. This slide originally indicated that Agnes Bellinger was the niece of Jenny Tlanat, and the correction is that she is in fact the daughter. So Agnes Bellinger is the daughter of Jenny Tlanat, and I want to make that correction for the record, and Chuck's assured me we can get the slide changed in the original as well, so that would be great. So again, my apology for the mistake, and glad to be able to correct it. Over my 50 years, I've had the extraordinary good fortune to be able to work with, learn from, be mentored by, and on occasion corrected. And in the course of that career, these are some of the mentors and friends that I have made. And in my remarks, I try to convey as much as I can, but I don't speak for them. It's only in my understandings that I'm bring forward the information that I have been taught and learned. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of others involved in this particular project. The funding for this Indigenous TEK project was from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Dr. Rosita Worrell was graciously facilitated the research and running it through SHI, which made it a much smoother process for all involved. I'd like to thank my co-principal executive, Jeffrey Brooks of the Bureau of Ocean and Environmental Management, for his excellent work in report preparation. I'd like to thank Chuck Smythe for his research assistance and administration of the project. I'd like to thank Emily Pastor here in the Archives Department for assistance with the number of documents. And I want to extend special thanks and gratitude to the Indigenous experts for sharing their knowledge with all of us. It's very important to, first of all, be sure and understand and position the knowledge coming forward as it's grounded is how is Gooch positioned in the Tlingit existence-scape. So it is really the Gooch Kwan that as people, they are essential qualities similar to humans, but they are distinctive as well. They are demand and worthy of respect through appropriate behavior in interactions with them. They are capable of retaliating if treated badly. As such, they are first of all sentient, and in that way, understanding of what is being communicative. They are attentive to humans and how humans go about doing things. They are relational. They engage relations not only amongst themselves, but with human beings in an ongoing basis. It sounds like a bit of feedback, but nevertheless. That relationality is, just want to briefly stress the evidence for that relationality in the formation of crests in the At'u. For many clans comes from a dynamic relationship in the context of caring for the wolf, and then the wolf in reciprocation caring for humans later on. This is a very important of relationality. They make choices about what they do. They are aware of the necessity for dignity, and they have power. So the Gooch is a moiety, crest, raven, and wolf, sometimes eagle, but wolf is primary in the south. They are spoken to, howled to, and requests can be made of them by members of the wolf moiety as well. Opinions about wolves vary. Some are motivated by anxious tension with wolves. Others respect, love, and engage with them without care. However, they are always respected for the manner in which they conduct their lives. They take care of their pack, protect their offspring, provide for them intelligence. They demonstrate extreme intelligence, producing excellence in tracking and killing their prey. And these are the ways then in which Tlingit people have come to understand and position Gooch in the existence-scape. So this particular project was undertaken by the request of the Fish and Wildlife Service, who was conducting a species status assessment under the Endangered Species Act. And President Biden's office had requested that, this was in the fall of 2021, that any federal regulatory action for which traditional Indigenous knowledge was available and relevant should be included. This particular research project was the first to come to completion and be used in that fashion And I believe Dr. Worrell has spoken at the White House or in the context of White House meetings about this particular outcome in terms of the contributions this research made to regulatory decisions. We had a relatively short time frame in which to produce this, which is not unusual in federal regulatory processes, but we informed the Fish and Wildlife Service that that particular framing is not to be considered as the model, because normally this would be a 3-year project in terms of the kind of interactive and field work that would be engaged in. So that's important to clarify. So this is the range of what is called in Alaska the Alexander Archipelago wolf. However, it can also be called the coastal wolf because it extends all the way down to southern British Columbia. So we have these wolves not just with us in Alaska, but elsewhere. The interviews were undertaken with Indigenous experts throughout southeastern Alaska, from Yakutat, the Haines-Klukwan area, Excursion Inlet on the North Shore, in Cake, Klawak, Craig, Heidelberg, and also on Metlakatla in the lower mainland. So we got a good geographic coverage, but not quite as many as I would like to have had, but the short time frame militated against it. This is an indication of the communities and the individuals that we were able to conduct the interviews with, and thanks to all of them for their graciousness and for their openness in sharing their information and vantage points. The basic research methodology involved identifying the experts based on my personal connections over 50 years and knowledge, through informed snowball contacts, identifying additional experts, and also through the tribal governments. In-person interviews were held with all of the, in all cases except one. A protocol covering the significant issues and background was prepared, and it was used in an open-ended fashion to acquire answers to questions, and used in all of the interviews. So interviewees tailored their responses to questions, and it wasn't in a didactic choice things. Important information began with the personal biography, including their traditional teaching and training, the period of personal contact interaction with wolves, the modes of those interactions, whether hunting, trapping, encountered when hunting other species, or encountering various encounters when in other sorts of movements across the land. Key areas of information are discussed below, and I'll get to those right now. Traditional knowledge and learning was important. Most experts stated they learned about wolves from their elders through stories and accounts. Examples including learning how wolves can encircle you and threaten you and prevent you from escaping. A number of experts participated with the elders in the actual trapping of wolves, and wolves are extremely sensitive. And in the interactive strategy, one of the practices of engagement was given by the elder Thomas Jack from Hoonah, who indicated that he was taught by his grandfather that when he encountered wolves in the forest context, that he was to fall to his knees and lower his head and say in deference and lowered speech, "Bring the short spears forward." And that would be a communication to his own family about them, but it was being conveyed to the wolves as well. So in that fashion, the interaction was at once deferential, but also indicating the willingness to respond if threatened by the wolves. So this indicates one of the key points that underlies the continuous movement across a field of tension with wolves in some encounters, in addition to the occasions when there are positive things. For other elders, particularly, wolves have a phantasmic quality. And what do I mean by that? I mean, wolves are in the environment. They're in the forests, and you may or may not be aware of their presence. That's what's meant by phantasms. They're there, and they are potentially observing you, because they're always in an observational mode in that sense. They may or may not elect to be envisioned at any point. And there have been certain transitions in that kind of vantage point that are the result of changing technologies and changing positions. For example, wolves being an economic asset in terms of the sale of their skins, and the use of rifles, no longer short spears, but rifles. So some of these kinds of positionings somewhat altered. Information on the social organization of the wolves. The pack is the basic unit consisting of multiple wolves. It's a multi-generational unit, 3 generations at most. Generally, a male-female couple constitute the lead. They are the alpha couple, and they train their offspring in the various skills necessary. Sometimes there's an alpha female. This may have resulted as a result of the alpha male dying or disappearing, but the female becomes the lead of the pack. They travel together, they sleep together for the most part, and they den together. The den is the quote-unquote home of them. Occasionally, non-alpha males separate to scout, and alpha female feeds first when a kill is made. At 1 to 2 years, juveniles leave when new litters are born, and this is then the basis for the formation of new packs. Sometimes recruits from other packs may join. Sometimes the older wolf will become isolate. There are also rare occasions on which packs can join together for larger activities. It was rarely reported, but it apparently does happen. Packs have territories, and experts in all of the areas spoke of pack territories. And these are the areas and domains frequented by a pack that is basically bounded. They don't wander, typically, unless they're under stress, and other packs do not enter. They mark their territories with urine, like their relatives, the dogs, and experts have observed packs fighting each other in boundary areas. Wolves in certain areas have territories organized by stream drainages. For example, the Cake experts reported this on Kuprianof and Kuyu Islands, and also this is characteristic in the Yakutat lowlands. Wolves generally travel in a circuit around their territory, and typically there is a relatively similar time period for them to complete the surround. It varies in length, presumably depending upon success in areas, and but 2 weeks seems to be a standard period and episode for the movement through their domain. Packs vary in size. The range is typically from 5, which would be at an early stage of a domestic cycle, when before there's a litter and offspring, up to 15, but rarely more than 15 in a pack. On rare occasions, as I mentioned, the packs can join together. So these are examples of what the experts provided in terms of the information on the general territories and the size of packs. So you can see here in the Klukwan-Haines area of the Chilkat Valley, there are about 6 separately identified packs, some of which may join. The elliptical Nike shows ones that may join together, and the relative numbers in those packs. I'll speak about this area later on when I talk about some other aspects of the region. This is the wolf pack areas. These tend to be smaller packs on Kuyu and Kuprianof Islands that are organized by the drainages, and even Annette Island has a number of different wolf packs, again located in various different areas of the island. Now, in terms of their size and appearance, adults range from 50 to 80 pounds. and that's less than what I will talk about later on, timber or Yukon wolves. This is the Alexander Archipelago wolves are treated as a subpopulation, and they're related to the larger wolves on the mainland, and whose size is oftentimes 20 to 30 pounds larger. Males have the chest protruding out, adult males. Females may have a bulging thoracic as a result, stomach of giving birth. Males are generally, but not always, larger, and the colors are predominantly mottled with gray and yellow, but also black is a very significant part of the coloration, and rarely white wolves as well. In terms of their seasonal movement, in addition to the territorial circuits, wolves also exhibit seasonal patterns of movement between low and high elevation. On Prince of Wales Island and mainland areas, the Chilkat River Valley, Excursion Inlet, wolves follow deer and mountain goats to high elevation in summer and stay closer to sea level in winter in clear areas of old growth. Dens can be found in all kinds of locations, from underground in roots, systems of large trees, to areas between multiply closely growing trees, and to overhangs and caves. The reproduction are quite high levels of reproductive capacity. Females produce an annual litter, which occurs in the springtime. The number in the litter and the number surviving varies from year to year, and depending upon the available food. It can be as high as 9. This was quite striking to me, that how large the number of offspring could be, so that if you have successive years of a large litter, this can lead to a very rapid increase in the wolf population. And the implications of that are well understood and are part of the critical monitoring of information that the experts do on the status of wolves. One expert reported an increase of 200% in pack size in 3 years. That's monumental in terms of how many. So you have to be on top of these situations if you depended on what they are dependent upon. Deer and moose, just by contrast, the primary prey, ungulate prey, produce at most 2 offspring annually. So one can quickly see that this can quickly go out of balance if there isn't some other adjustment. I'll talk about some food later on here. In terms of, let me come back to this one. I'll go to the food first. Experts observed eating and they examine wolf scat to determine the diet. Deer on the islands of southeastern Alaska are the most important ungulate, while on the mainland, experts indicated that moose, where available, are preferred. Salmon upstream during spawning periods are utilized by most wolf packs, and they are reported as of high significance in the Chilkat River Valley. One expert reported that the decline in the salmon runs of the Chilkat have seriously impacted the wolf populations because of their dependence upon salmon. One expert also reported, but it was contended by others, that he had observed wolves eating ulican in the Chilkat River, but he was the only one who reported that. Occasionally, when stressed, they will pursue beavers and fur bearers as well. Sea otters have been observed. Experts report them consuming the carcasses of sea otters killed by humans and thrown overboard, but also it has been reported on Pleasant Island and near Pleasant Island off of Gustavus that they actually have gone in the water and driven nearshore sea otters to the land in order to be able to consume them. Not a lot of food on a sea otter, by the way. That's why human beings, Tlinkits, don't eat them. They might not too good. The studies of scat on Prince of Wales Island show highest degree of variety in diet. And that's a function of the density of the wolves there and the relative high level of competition amongst them. So wolves will diversify their diet when they reach stress points. Turning to communications, Wolves utilize a number of vocalizations to communicate. Howling, which you had the joy of being able to hear earlier, is primarily to communicate location or search for others in the area, it is thought. We don't know, we don't have wolf testimony on that point. But various kinds of howls do occur in terms of the duration, the pitch range, single or multiple, continuous or falling. So there are a range of howls. I don't think they've unpacked or deciphered the differences there. I could be wrong there. Growling is a common practice, can be both internal to establish hierarchy as well as external to others. Whine, in submissive context, a whine sound is emitted if confronted by a superior force. Yips, which are very short staccato blips of noise, are used when confronting and circling prey. The experts stated that the yips are used in coordination to coordinate amongst pack members when they are hunting. Barking is rarely reported amongst by the experts. Some experts have endeavored with various degrees of success to emulate howls. One expert claimed that he could call wolves in with his howling abilities and bring them to him. Others weren't quite so bold in stating that their success. One expert stated that he developed a challenge call howl, which he successfully brought wolves to him, and in one case he stated a wolf charged him in the context of that howl. Two experts reported that wolves recognized them personally, and both of those two individuals were trappers. So that and they would state that there are certain wolves that they have tried their lifetime to trap and have never been successful in trapping them, and that those wolves know who they are. They recognize them. And in one case, they have a particular communicative interaction form when they perceive that individual. The hunting patterns. Scouts leave the pack to look for prey. The pack typically moves along a route together, one behind the other when traveling. There are numerous trails through their areas, leading them into various different landscapes. They may spread out in a side-by-side line with separation to advance on a prey. And the pack will organize to drive the prey together, so that then from this line they will begin to drive the prey. And then when they're close enough, they will begin the encircling process. And then individual wolves will attack the prey, typically from the rear until down, then all join. Unless it's a small deer, one animal can take that down. Feeding begins after death, and small deer may be dragged back to the den. So dens may often have litter of bones around them as well. Training of young wolves in hunting behavior was observed. An interesting caveat here, where you can see wolves as a trope in Western Euro-American civilization are used for evil, for villainousness. This is associated with their combination of their conniving, their cleverness, and oftentimes in the context of ranchers, their wasteful habits of destruction. Okay, now what is a wasteful habit of destruction that they're talking about? Well, this is wolves sometimes don't consume what they've killed. And that context, the experts indicated they felt what arrives in the circumstances in which young wolves are being taught to kill, and they are exercising their newly acquired skills without regard for the other circumstance. So there's apparently a pattern to them. Now, in terms of the drives and kill sites, several experts stated that wolves use the lay of the land specifically to drive prey into locations where the prey has little opportunity to escape. The pack is organized into two wings that then push forward in unison and prevent the prey from backing out until they reach the location where they can encircle. Observation of this pattern, I believe, of wolf behavior may have been the basis for the development of the corral systems utilized by interior Dene for caribou corral systems. Many of you may know that the Dene set up these long corridors of branches and trees, and they would then drive the caribou down through them. And I suspect that as other Tlinkits talk about what they learned from other species, the Dene would perhaps attribute this practice to observing what the deers do. Now, in addition, there are what I have labeled kill sites. Thomas Mills and Thomas George, Thomas Mills in Excursion Inlet and Thomas George on Prince of Wales Island, reported specific discrete locations as kill sites. Thomas Mills described a point on Pleasant Island off Gustavus where literally generations of wolves had dispatched deer, and he had observed them in that particular location on several occasions. Thomas George described a ridge bluff outside of Craig, Alaska, in a similar term, where that over time, systematically, it would be used as a location to dispatch deer. In both cases, the experts testified that they reported an abundance, a heavy abundance of bones, creating a layered deposit of deer remains at these sites. As someone who's used archaeology, I said, wow, gee, there should be an archaeological investigation of those, just to see how long the sites have been used, over how many generations. Of course, do you think any biologists thought that was a good idea? Never mind. Now, turning to environmental factors that were reported. It was very clear to all of the experts that old growth mature forest is the best sustained environment, because within the old growth you have trees of different age with a closed canopy and an open understory. This is most beneficial for deer and the ecosystem balance over the long term. Clear-cut logging, as shown here in opposite Huna, over the last 50 years, actually began in the 1950s, has covered many areas of southeastern Alaska, but especially in Prince of Wales Island. And this leads to a period of succession of 10 to 15 years of relatively clear open area and rapid shrub growth, and this gives you an artificial bloom of deer for a short period of time. But after, they will be in abundance, and everybody loved hunting deer then, but after 15 years, what you'll see is in second growth are all of the same. They're not multi-age growth, and they're much closer together. That's why for many years, some of you may be aware, they did these thinning contracts. A thinning contract was about cutting down and trying to create other conditions. Here is an example on the left of old growth with multiple age trees, an understory, and the understory is also good for winter protection. And on the right you see a second growth, which is very, very tight together, very limited understory, and difficult to penetrate and access both for deers and for wolves. Other environmental factors that are important are snowfall and ice conditions. Heavy snowfall conditions cause substantial die-off of deer who are unable to maneuver through it, and this of course is then going to reduce subsistence supply for people and wolves. There are icy conditions. When icy conditions are confronted, the trails make wolf movement difficult and keep deer still as well. Fascinatingly, the roads on Prince of Wales and Kuprianof provide excellent corridors for wolves to rapidly move to new locations. They don't have to navigate their own landscapes. One expert reported tracking a pack at 25 miles per hour on a road for over 3 miles. So they can move at a pretty rapid clip in those circumstances. Human density is also an important factor in terms of being able to sustain the deer populations and wolf populations. This is especially noteworthy on Prince of Wales Island, where there are 3 indigenous communities and multiple other logging-derived communities competing for deer. This is also, as I mentioned before, is the location where the wolf diets are extremely diverse. And this is also where you have the highest degrees of engagement by the experts in the context of harvesting wolves to be able to maintain balance. And this is what gives rise to what I call the experts' complex models. And their complex models are ecosystem models, which importantly include and are oftentimes based upon the need for being able to provide for subsistence needs. Scott Jackson in Cake, for example, explained that his motivations for engaging in the harvest of wolves through trapping activities and through monitoring the circumstances was because a relative of his had died in a drowning as he was having to go across Frederick Sound to Admiralty to hunt because the deer population on Kuprianof had dwindled to such a low level due to the high number of wolves. So that was his impetus, and then and so you saw all of the knowledge of those wolf packs derived from his systematic encounters with them. So use of multiple indicators by him with regard to the level of the wolves and reports of subsistence success rates become the indicators which calibrate to the activity levels in terms of harvests. Similarly, John Katzik had been taught in Haines by his elders, and he'd watched his elders who would say, you have to watch the wolves, and when they get too many, you have to take the numbers down. So typically, Scott would say, yeah, if I saw a pack reaches over, if a pack reaches over 10, I take it down 3 or 4 animals. So there's a very, very calibrated response that recognizes the coexistence. Thomas George, in addition to these particular indicators, also uses and watches the health of wolves very closely. One of the ways that he watches the health of wolves is not only the manginess of the hair and the exterior evidences of various kinds of rashes and breakouts that indicate poor nutrition, but also he will examine when he's taking the skin off to see the level of fat. And this is an indicator to him of what the relative health of the animals are. And it's very important then, when you say unhealthy animals, that's, in his view, is a result of lowered success rates and high numbers. And it's, again, an indicator of the need to decline, to reduce those, to reduce numbers in that particular area. Mike Duville of Craig covers the islands west of Prince of Wales Island, and he notes that the a wolf pack will move between islands, and he notes oftentimes that they will deplete all of the deer on an island before moving on, so that his motivation is to maintain healthy deer populations on the islands, which are very important to the subsistence uses of the people of Craig and Cloak. And just on this note, where these experts are at work, they work to maintain balance. Tony Sanderson of Heidelberg says that they do not have an expert trapper hunter at this particular time, and he believes that they need that, as they are suffering in terms of a relative limitations on the amount of deer that they can get harvest for subsistence because of the high population of wolves in their area in South Prince of Wales. Very important finding of the research concerns this relationship to the mainland wolves. Or the Alexandra wolves are a subpopulation and distinguished from the continental wolves primarily on size and location, and there's some genetic differences. These large wolves, however, do travel down into southeastern Alaska. They travel on the wool corridors of the Alsek River in the north to reach Yakutat. Chilkat, obviously, to reach the ocean there, Taku, Stikine, and likely the Unuk as well. These are all the corridors from the interior down to the south, down to the coast. Experts in Yakutat, Excursion Inlet, Haines, Klukwan, and Metlakatla reported observing wolves larger than their normal wolf pack size that are typically found in the area. There, in all but one case, such sightings were of individual wolves, and sightings are neither regular nor systematic, but their presence in there. The expert from Annette Island reported seeing large wolves actually on Annette Island, and they can indeed pass over. There's a relatively short, wolves can move across Occupy Islands, they can swim across and make new islands. One of the interesting, and I would suggest unexplained questions is why aren't there wolves on Admiralty, Chichagof, and Baranof? There may be spatial separations that in terms of the distance across water, but experts were not of one mind on why that was the case. Another possibility was that there simply was such limited that the competition with the bears would preclude their sustained presence. What are the nature of species interactions? The prey are, first of all, deer throughout, but especially on the islands are the main prey. Moose on the mainland are preferred, Yakutat, Haines, and Klukwan. Predators, reports of attacks of wolves on bears, black and brown occurred, and bears on wolves were also provided. So those are competitors for those food sources. Haines and Klukwan expert reported observing a bear consuming wolf pups and wolves consuming bear pups. So they're operating to cut down on the numbers of their engage in population management of their competitors on their own as well. Sometimes, this is what I mentioned before, how wolves sometimes harvest and do not consume. Experts suggested that this occurs when the juveniles are being trained and are using their new things. Wolves and ravens are symbolic to a interesting degree, and it is in this symbiosis of wolves and ravens that you might get a metaphor for why there are wolves and ravens amongst the Tlingit, is in this symbiosis that occurs. Experts report observing ravens flying over several wolves and then heading off, and the wolves followed that direction in flight to a deer. When the wolves have finished, ravens are constantly monitoring wolves when they're in pursuit of game. They're making lots of noise in the area, and so when the wolves have completed their killing and finished the feeding, the ravens will consume the remnants after the wolves have departed the scene. So there's a pretty substantial relationship there of symbiotic existence. Wolf-dog hybrids. This is another really interesting and important finding that was unexpected, especially by the biologist, in terms of what it was. Wolves and dogs can interbreed. Wolves and coyotes can interbreed, and I'll have something to say about that momentarily. Hybrids are what are referred to as the offspring of the dog-wolf interbreeding. Wolves can enter a community and impregnate resident females in heat, and that's an unintentional hybrid. However, the Tlingit systematically, and who knows how far back in time this went, we had hoped to study it, systematically sought on occasion to obtain hybrids. Oral tradition indicates this pattern began many generations ago. This is because Tlingit value the characteristics of the hybrid in certain areas, in terms of the assistance with hunting, in terms of protecting and warning, and in terms of packing and their strength. So a hybrid offers a number of advantages. In the Tlingit case, females in heat would be staked out on the edge of a town when the wolf pack was nearby, and the hope was then to obtain a hybrid in the aftermath. I mentioned the various reasons for valuing hybrids. This practice is known in Klawock, Cake, and Yakutat. Expert information from Yakutat said that the trappers in the village had numerous hybrids up until the 1980s, which they used for packing and assistance, when ADF&G biologists came in and took them away, said they were wild and they couldn't be kept in the community. So there are no longer any hybrids in southeastern Alaska that have been sought by indigenous people. In terms of the interactions with humans, experts reported that if wolves spotted a human at a distance, they generally kept the distance or moved out of sight. No expert reported knowledge of killing or personal injury to them or to others in their experiences or in stories they heard. One expert reported a story about a man being surrounded by wolves and having to fire on them to escape. One expert reported being snuck up on wolves who growled in his ear within a distance of 3 or 4 feet, and then the pack followed him out of the area that he was in. Another expert reported being surrounded by wolves in the water of the Chilkat River while fording the river to reach shore. He was surrounded and they were splashing and jumping around him until he climbed up on shore and walked away. One of the things that I found quite interesting in my question was, how do wolves relate to humans when they're hunting? Okay, so other animals do wolves watch humans and do they track humans? And a number of experts said yes, that the wolves will be paying attention to them when they are out hunting. But no expert had ever been approached by wolves when processing a kill or when packing a kill or portion out. Found that fascinating. Wolves observed kills and processing and quickly come to the carcass when the hunter leaves and consume the remains. So this here is a picture of Stan Hotch packing a mountain goat off of the Chilkat River Mountains nearby. And that he's obviously, I would say, in a vulnerable state, but he survived in those circumstances. Now, turning to the significance of the indigenous knowledge in terms of the species status assessment, you'll hear more about when things are going on. And here are, as designated by the lead biologist, the indigenous knowledge contributions to the SSA. Seasonal habitat use, hunting behaviors and predator-prey dynamics, distribution and dispersal patterns, population trends, that means reproduction and pack sizes, impacts from land use activities, overlap with interior wolves, the denning behaviors and social organization, and of course the cultural importance and understanding. These are obviously an enormous set of topics to which the research findings contributed. The finding, of course, was in fact that the Alexander Archipelago wolves should not be listed, and that was certainly what the experts all agreed, that wolves were not in any way, shape, or form in any circumstance. Final thoughts. Expert principles are respect and balance, as are traditional in the Tlingit existence-scape. Full recognition of the wolf as a co-participant in the existence-scape. And I want to make note of how this is quite different from the Western Euro-American existence-scape that I spoke of earlier, in which the position is often and continues to be today in states like Idaho and Montana and Wyoming, where wolves have been introduced after near extinction, to destroy them, to drive them to extinguish. This is the Euro-American existence-scape's value, at least in that domain of those who interact with them most directly. It's not a larger public domain. The notion in the larger urban kind can accept the existence of wolves, but in those, there's a parallel that I don't want to mention. One young expert speaks to them in Tlingit, which he has learned, explaining his present and his intentions as taught by his grandmother. And this would be a classic Tlingit pattern, explaining your presence in the language and telling them you mean no harm. Balance means meeting the needs for subsistence for humans and wolves while making possible healthy prey and ecosystems. They know that wolves are capable of overharvest just like humans. They know that excess deer can lead to massive population collapse. On Pleasant Island, a biological study showed that indeed wolves had depleted the deer populations on that island. In the biologist model, these are long-term models. At some point, the wolves will leave the island, the deers will come back, and 200 years from now, the cycle will be returned. That's not the way in which Tlinkits pursue the world in terms of which they live. Coronation Island is another example of the same kind of, they introduced deer, then later on they thought, well, they're getting to be too many deer, so we're going to put some wolves out here. And guess what? Pretty soon, 30 years, there were no deer and no wolves on Coronation Island. So the Tlingit role in terms of what constitutes balance is critical in sustaining an ecosystem in which all presence is recognized. Harvesting levels are determined by information acquired to meet these various objectives. So the indigenous experts' continuous engagement, processing of information, along with the traditional knowledge they've received, make them a vital element in sustaining healthy ecosystems in southeastern Alaska. And then in the context of our research, this particular quote was given by one of the experts, Mike Jackson, in terms of engagement with the wolves and engagement with the regulatory process. Our knowledge is ancient and continuous. Wolves are cherished just like a person. Our relations with wolves are local and intimate. Acknowledgement and respect for our knowledge is a key part of the regulatory process. The incorporation of our knowledge in the determination is a significant step. A concern of ours is that the law separates and alienates us from our surroundings and relationships with all of our natural resources, which include the wolves. So here is the research report, which I think if you wanted to get it, I know you can get it off of the internet in terms of my site on ResearchGate. I can't speak to whether or not you can make a request from the Fish and Wildlife and get it, but I would hope so. So on that note, thank you for your, both here and those of you watching in live stream, and I look forward to any questions that I might make an effort to answer. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Steve. That was very enlightening. Before I turn to questions, I just offer one additional comment, which is that Steve mentioned one of the constraints for the research was the length of time and the need to do this in an accelerated manner in order to meet the requirements of the SSA. The other thing is that Sealaska Heritage put in $15,000 into this study to increase the number of experts that were interviewed and expand the geographic expanse of the study. So,
yes, thank you very much, SHI, and also on expanding the cultural knowledge component, so we were able to include more information than otherwise would have been there. Thank you.
Questions? Yeah.
So Steve, I actually have two questions. The first one is, if you had more money, where would you go next with this? And the second one is there any other species that you think a study like this would be as important and as interesting?
Well, the additional time would have been to expand. This is another important point: is that the number of indigenous experts is not overwhelming, so it's very important that the new generations are brought along into this process, and that is something that should be attended to: is how new generations can produce this particular stream of knowledge. And I might say that there's a lot of discussion about something called co-production of knowledge, which means supposedly working with a biologist. And several of these experts, in fact, have worked with biologists who are engaged in their studies as well. And you can clearly hear their critiques of the methodologies and the findings from those things. So one of the things would be participant observation in field circumstances that was not possible. The visitation to these various different locations, to dens, to trails, but especially to things like kill sites, places that indigenous experts regard as significant to the wolves. Those are all part of it. The coming back to the information again in each case, that is following up with transcripts, getting fuller information to fill in certain topics. So these are all of the areas where this would be pursued. It would be very important really to do this kind of endeavor on sea otters. There has not been an indigenous knowledge of sea otters. There are a number of projects about sea otters, but not systematic information. And I believe SHI at some point was involved in a discussion about, because of the issue of seaweed, black seaweed and the problems with that seaweed. That's another topical area in which this kind of research could go on. So there are obviously a number of domains that represent regulatory issues or in fact challenges which should receive this sort of attention and should engage regulatory agents systematically with the experts. And I think it's noteworthy that this is a federal action and it's not a state action. Thank you for the question. In the back, go ahead. There's somebody in the back.
Huh? Oh, okay.
So I was just curious, have you used thermal drones in the observation and study of the wolves? And is there any video component of this study that you did?
No, that would be another thing. I don't think I'd want to use drones flying over wolves. It's too invasive. I wouldn't want to do that, but it is a tool. It is a potential tool that could be used in short-term periods. For example, in short-term periods at around birthing time to count litter numbers. It might help with population numbers in certain specific kinds. But in terms of, it's the same thing with regard to where they put on the animals that, yeah, collars. Collaring is not something that indigenous cultures are too big on. Collaring and tracking it, cutting down on it's not respectful to the autonomy of the being. Behind you, Joe. Yeah.
Dr. Langdon, thank you. I'm wondering if any of the experts that you worked with noticed how changes in habitat quality, like maturing second growth or recovering clear cuts, affected how both deer populations and then subsequently wolf populations would use different areas of their home ranges. Did you notice a difference in behavior or relational use of changed habitat?
Well, that's a very good question. The basic framing of that topic by the experts, particularly on Prince of Wales, is that those dense second growth areas are virtually unusable. They're very difficult. They don't provide the mature, especially mature overgrowth. The canopy, the closed canopy for wintertime, is really what protects deer populations from heavy snowfall. So you don't get that, and you're getting the access to it. The whole thing, the numbers of deer simply decline after that 15-year, when the 15-year open period of rapid shrub growth and food is available. Everybody thinks they're in glorious heaven until you reach the 15th year, and then things start to go south. Yes, that's right, south. I think that's the appropriate metaphor. Things go south when they become problematic. But nevertheless, that is the characteristic of what they talk about and they're aware of, and they wasn't the circumstance. So.
Hi, I was curious within talking about the Tlingit control of overgrowth within the wolf population, if the experts observed a seasonal pattern of that, in which like certain times of the year they were having to go in and individually control the wolf population.
It's a good question. So they're going to be monitoring the scat and the litter sizes. And then they're also going to be hearing about the deer hunting success. They are only legally allowed a very narrow window. Well, it's not that window. It's usually sometime, I believe the season is from like November until maybe May or April before the birthing gives place. So they can harvest in those time periods. But there is, especially in the southern Prince of Wales area, there's a lot of there have been a lot of tensions with regulatory bodies over what the relative harvest levels should be allowed, and the experts generally feel that the levels aren't set high enough to accomplish the necessary goals to help the deer populations and thereby the subsistence. So there's a lot of tension in that particular matrix, and because I mean most of your biologists don't come from subsistence backgrounds, that they're not in tune, and as Mike was saying, the motivations in their regulatory things do not include human subsistence, and that's what he meant by what Mike meant by when he said the law separates and alienates us, and that is by exclusion, the failure to include systematically the human component.
We have a question online from one of your former colleagues in Anchorage. He asks, can the research methods be used elsewhere in the U.S. to bring indigenous knowledge into harvesting rules on federal lands?
Well, I think that was the intent of the administration. I believe it was the intent was percolated into that area by Deborah Holland, Secretary of Interior, as an indigenous person. And I've heard of some use amongst the Apaches, that some TEK, I wasn't very, it didn't appear to me to be a very rigorous usage of it, but I think it's very important, especially to continuously push the envelope into these domains, and I'm hopeful Dr. Worrell could speak more to it because she was in those conversations making the characteristics and the success of this project evident to a broader circuit of people in that situation. Okay, Chuck. Is there another question?
No, no more online. Any more? Any audience? No? Well, thank you very much again, Steve, for a very informative lecture and a good research project. Let's hope we can get more funding for more of that kind of research.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Thank you all again.